大家好。
Good afternoon. Allow me to introduce the officials today. We have the Secretary for Commerce and Economic Development, Mr. Edward Yao, Mr. Christopher Hui, Secretary for Financial Services and Treasury, and Ms. Lee, Permanent Secretary of Financial Services. Now I will give the floor to Mr. Yao. Good afternoon, media friends and fellow citizens. After the delivery of the policy address, many have asked how Hong Kong's economy is performing and where we will go, and what new directions have been announced in the PA. When we talk to local business community and foreign investors, we understand that we are still facing two challenges. That is, the challenges brought about by the epidemic and the global economic environments. There are protectionism and trade disputes. However, from all the signs, we can see that we are at a very favorable situation. This is because of the central government's support and the stakeholders' efforts. From objective figures, we can see that our economy is still going strong. In many key economic sectors, we have recorded positive growth in the past year. With the strength of one country, two systems, we have a very favorable prospect. I draw this conclusion with the support of figures. I'm going to present to you some figures to prove the optimism of our economic prospects. Every year around the same time, the Census and Statistics Department and the Invest Hong Kong would carry out a yearly survey concerning the numbers of business operations in Hong Kong with parent companies located outside Hong Kong. In this year, despite the coronavirus and the social unrest in the past 2 or 3 years, many worries that many companies would leave Hong Kong. However, I can rebut these reports with the figures. In terms of the number of business operations in Hong Kong, we have seen a slight increase of 9,040. We have seen an increase of 10%, that is 9,049. Since the beginning of this term of the government in year 2017, the number has been on the rise steadily. In the past 5 years, there has been an increase of 10%. For the number of employees engaged, the number is 473,000. In terms of source country and places, there hasn't been much change in terms of the top 5 countries or places. Mainland accounted for 22%, to be followed by Japan, the United States, the UK, and Singapore. So there have been worries that companies are leaving Hong Kong because of various factors. We don't see this trend from the statistics. On the contrary, we are seeing a steady rising trend. And then for startups, every year we would review the number of startups created in Hong Kong. We have seen a very encouraging trend. Compared with the year 2020, in a single year, there has been a 29% increase to 3,755 startups. Compared with the figure 5 years ago, the increase is almost 70%. In terms of employees engaged, the number is 13,804, a 29% increase over 1 year. In terms of business operations, the increase was 12%, and the number and the percentage of increase in personnel employed was 29. It includes fintech, logistics, information technology, and professional services, and so on. It sends a clear message that we are still a very attractive place globally Many foreign investors are using Hong Kong as a base to develop their business. Some may find it surprising that we still recorded a growth in trade in the past 2 or 3 years because of the local social unrest, the coronavirus epidemic, plus the trade war. Many worry that our trading sector would decline. However, the figure recorded in the first 6 months proved otherwise. The trade in commodities amount was record high. We have recorded 6.5099 trillion Hong Kong dollars worth of trade in commodities. The amount of trade surpassed 800 billion Hong Kong dollars each month. The last time we recorded that amount was before the trade war. However, we have recorded this level of trade for a consecutive 7 to 8 months. The total amount of trade in commodities recorded by Hong Kong has risen to number 6 globally. These two positive growths were not easy to come by. That's why in this policy address, we have measures to consolidate the positive growth trend, especially concerning the growth in trade in commodities. We have to ride on this trend to consolidate our strength in terms of trade and commerce. In the past few years, we have been supporting SMEs to export markets. And also we are supporting SMEs in terms of financing. True, there are bigger orders and more businesses. However, the risk has increased as well. That's why we are helping SMEs to facilitate the export financing. With the order in hand, SMEs can engage in financing with banks. Because of the increased risk, this may not be easy. That's why we are working with the Hong Kong Export Credit Insurance Corporation, the HK ECIC will issue credit guarantee coverage to policyholders export finance for up to 70% at a maximum of $50 million. And also we have a differential indemnity ratio arrangement, which can increase the number of indemnity payout. For smaller insurance policies, approval procedures and applications can be handled online. For those who require export insurance guarantee, the risk will become lower and controllable. And also the order itself can be used as a collateral to take out loans from the bank. Later on, the Secretary for FST will explain the commercial data interchange, which can facilitate financing for SMEs. When we talk about commerce, the conventional exhibition industry is also very important. It is very important for our status as an international financial center. In the past, many events have been deferred and cancelled because of the closure of borders and the coronavirus epidemic. We have set aside $1 billion for the C&E industry subsidy scheme. Participants of mega-scale events can receive a waiver of rent. In the past year, we have spent close to $150 million to subsidize events. Recently, a lot of conventional exhibition events focusing on local customers were held on time, and we are receiving international events as well. For example, Basel and the RISE Summit will be held in Hong Kong for the next 5 years. This summit focus on startups.
And then we also see that within the trade, a number of people are still using online means to stage international exhibitions, and very often they may not be able to recover their costs. They can't use old ways to recover the costs. So to support the exhibition industry, we will allocate a sum from Convention and Exhibition Industry Subsidy Scheme to private organizations which have held an exhibition in the past 7 years, and they will be given a subsidy. And a subsidy with a maximum not exceeding 20% of the rental, subject to a limit of $1 million to be given to them, so that they can tide over their difficulties, so that they can get prepared when business comes back. So the scheme will be extended towards the end of next year, so that they can plan for their events next year. In the policy address, there is another measure mentioned, which has been discussed quite a lot in the past couple of days, apart from supporting startups and INT development. We are also looking into support measures and professional services, say, for example, protection of IP, intellectual property rights. Hong Kong is well positioned to develop in that front. We have a robust legal system, and we can do better in protecting intellectual property rights, especially when the country is in keen demand for IP products. And actually, the biggest country the country which applies for the largest number of IP rights is China. So Hong Kong must at least do two things. In terms of original grant patent, and starting from 2019, we have switched to the OGP system from the old re-registration system. A couple of months ago, I have made the announcement there are now 400 OGP applications being processed, and the first one has been approved. There has been a strong demand for such services, and we are well positioned to do that. And the IPD, Intellectual Property Department, will increase manpower resources to build up our OGP system. And you might recall that the Copyright Ordinance, there was a need to amend the Copyright Ordinance some 10 years ago. So infringement of copyright has been rampant internationally, and the existing laws failed to protect the rights owners' interests. So now that the executive legislature relationship has improved, and we have improved the electoral system, the LegCo can really allow for the amendment of the Copyright Ordinance. So we will consult the public again on this piece of law, and we plan to start the consultation next month. Some people ask, how will we start the process? In 2011 and 2014, there were extensive discussions within the LegCo. We will look at the discussions in the relevant bills committee at the LegCo, and then we will embark on a very extensive consultation exercise to listen to views from the community so that we can amend the law ASAP. From an economic perspective, from the perspective of building Hong Kong as a regional IP trading center, as stipulated in the 14th five-year plan, we must do the work as soon as possible. Well, we must get prepared to promote and develop IP trading. This morning, somebody mentioned about tourism. Well, the tourism is still in a plight now, and I must emphasize that at this juncture, the tourism industry must get prepared for the days ahead. So together with the tourism board, we will again stage major mega events in Hong Kong on the condition that Hong Kong's epidemic situation remains stable. And as long as the organizers put in proper anti-epidemic measures, then we can stage mega events again. Of course, when the events are being held, the main target groups will be local people. If we can stage such events, then the brands of such events can be reinforced, and that helps with enhancing the service standards in the tourism sector and also the transformation of the sector as well. So we will do that as early as possible. And when mega events are planned, we will do promotion and also tell the international community that Hong Kong is prepared to relaunch ourselves. So these are the measures that we're going to implement. And, well, the present economic situation in Hong Kong now is not easy to come by, and we do have advantages ourselves, and at the same time, there are a lot of opportunities provided by the government. In paragraph 30A, the chief executive said that our development can only be taken forward by taking advantage of the central government's policies in support of Hong Kong, which will in turn bring continuous impetus to our economy. Next, we will ask Mr. Christopher Ho to speak. Thank you, Ms. Edward. I would like to thank the media and for coming. So I'll spend some time to talk about the FSTB policy initiatives in the policy address. As we all know, the finance industry is a pillar of our economy and accounts for 21% of the GDP. Apart from bringing economic benefits, the finance industry also serves the real economy and benefits various sectors of the community. We can also give full play to our strategic position as the country's international financial center, and we can continue to contribute to the country's development. So we have 5 major directions here, as shown on the PPT. First is further consolidate our strengths for further development, contribute to our country's development, finance to benefit all. And fourthly is a more aggressive approach. We are more forward-looking in this direction. We would proactively explore and strive for innovation. And fifth, nurture talents and prepare for the future. You can see that we are going to enhance our listing regime. We will strengthen our offshore renminbi business, enhance our MPF system, and enhance Hong Kong's status as a green and sustainable financial hub, and we will groom financial talents. So our policy objectives are quite many and very diversified. So apart from discharging our traditional functions of financing and investment, we are also shouldering a very big, major economic and social development responsibility. We will try to help transform Hong Kong's economy into a green economy, help with the development of the INT industry, and help Hong Kong prepare for their retirement life. Now, as the country becomes stronger, Hong Kong plays the strategic role of facilitating the flow of capital between China and overseas countries. So the policy address stresses that we must strengthen our offshore renminbi business and help with the internationalization of the renminbi. So first, on consolidating our strengths for further development. In 2018, we carried out a reform our listing regime. So a timely and up-to-date regime has brought phenomenal growth to Hong Kong's financial market. In the past 3 years, we have 60 companies listed under the new regime, where these are new economy companies, raising over Hong Kong $550 billion, taking up 40% of IPO proceeds over the period. And a new impetus is being instilled into our IPO market.
Looking ahead, we will continue to review our listing regime to meet the need of local and foreign investors. That's why the HKEX will consult the new listing regime for special purpose acquisition company, which will end this month. We will also consult the markets of our enhancement measures. The results of promoting market growth by implementing new regulations is also seen in the private equity fund market. We have just completed the three-step strategy for private equity development and established a redomiciliation mechanism for the private equity fund. It is widely accepted by the market. At present, there are already 330 funds registered under the Limited Partnership Fund. The regime was just rolled out in August, and already we have 330 funds. We have to consolidate our role as a center for wealth, and we cannot miss the opportunity of developing family office business. In year 2019 to 2020, the number of ultra high net wealth individuals in Asia has grown by 12%, and the growth in China was the fastest in the world. The UHNWIs in Asia will grow further by 39% in year 2025 to over 160,000, and the market in Asia will account for 24% in the globe. It will create a lot of demand for family office business. The demand is not just limited to investment products and portfolios. It often involves family inheritance and required financial, legal, or even charity donation services. This will bring about opportunities to our professional services sector. The Invest Hong Kong has set up a dedicated team to provide services to those potential clients. We are also considering to provide tax concessions to attract more family offices. We have to contribute to our country's development. We have to develop offshore RMB business and facilitate RMB internationalization. In terms of infrastructure for the security market, we already have the RMB IPO and trading platform since year 2020. We are capable of handling pricing, trading, and settlements of RMB products. With our efforts, the daily turnover in RMB for our offshore liquidity pool exceed 850 billion RMB per day, and the daily turnover exceeds 1.5 trillion RMB. The RMB-listed products include stocks, real estate investment products, ETFs, and bonds. We will tap into the massive capital pool and the liquidity and enhance the demand for the issuance and trading of RMB securities. We will take a market-oriented approach to bring about new demand for RMB-denominated securities in Hong Kong, and we will look into the possibility of including RMB-denominated products in the southbound Stock Connect. Mainland investors for southbound trading are RMB-based. If we can have RMB-denominated products, then there will be lower currency conversion risk for the investors, and the certainty for trading prices will be increased. It will also increase the scale and liquidity of our RMB-denominated stock products and enhance developments for other RMB-denominated products. Third, our goal is finance to benefit all. We will facilitate MPF investments from the perspective of facilitating investments and lowering costs. Since last November, we have included the Shanghai and Shenzhen Stock Exchange into the approved stock exchanges list under the MPF authority to facilitate investments of MPF into A shares. As at the end of last year, the the mainland onshore bond market has exceeded $110 trillion, ranking second globally and first in Asia. For our northbound Bond Connect, the daily turnover has exceeded 26 billion RMB, with the foreign holdings exceeding $3.7 trillion. There are multiple international benchmark indexes which have announced inclusion of mainland onshore bonds, showing the recognition of RMB-denominated products by foreign investors. We are going to enhance the products to give more options for MPF investments. In terms of the eMPF, we are currently establishing the platform. The platform will achieve quantifiable savings of $30 to $40 billion in 10 years after commencing operation in year 2025. And it will give a full operation of eMPF to allow the governments to commence contributions for low-income workers. Another measure is commercial data interchange to facilitate SME financing, as mentioned by Edward. We have more than 340,000 SMEs in Hong Kong, as shown on the PowerPoint. That accounts for 98% of our business establishments, and they are a very important drive for our economy. There have been suggestions in the past few years that we should facilitate financing for SMEs. We have engaged the Hong Kong Productivity Council to engage in quarterly survey since Q3 2016. The survey shown that SMEs face uncertainty in taking out loans. The unsuccessful rate of new bank credit applications range from 2% to 25% quarter to quarter. As mentioned by the Chief Executive this morning, the commercial data interchange will allow enterprises to authorize service providers such as payment systems, public bodies, or utility companies to furnish banks with data so that banks can make more accurate predictions about sales and operations of SMEs, reducing the need for collateral. The fourth direction is about the future, that is proactively explore and strive for innovation. We will develop Hong Kong into a green finance center to tie in with the goal of the country to achieve carbon peak in year 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2060, and Hong Kong's goal to achieve carbon neutrality by 2015. A dedicated team to develop the carbon emission trading market has been set under the steering group to develop Hong Kong into a regional carbon emission trade center. The Hong Kong EX will work with the Guangzhou Futures Exchange in financial products developments related to carbon emission trading. The government will also give favorable considerations to public works projects having significant contributions to carbon neutrality. In terms of fintech, we are actively exploring with the mainland counterparts the formation of a one-stop sandbox network to facilitate financial institutions and I&T companies to test cross-border fintech applications in the Greater Bay Area. As such, we can facilitate I&T companies and institutions across the border to test out these fintech products. In terms of Hong Kong growth portfolio, we have appointed 3 private equity firms as general partners in the Hong Kong growth portfolio. We will make strategic investments with a Hong Kong nexus to consolidate our roles as international financial trade and innovation centers. The last direction is also very important. That is to ensure sustainable growth of the financial service industry by nurturing talent. We will put in more resources to nurture talents for them to seize the opportunities in the future. We will work with the Education Bureau and the Labor and Welfare Bureau to establish a qualification standard for financial services practitioners under the qualification framework so that employers and employees can have a clearer qualification standard. We will strive to include more financial services related courses under the Continuing Education Fund to attract more talents. We have just finished reviewing the talents list of Hong Kong promulgated in year 2018. We have added professionals in compliance in asset management and financial professionals in ESG into the talents list to send a clear message to the public that we welcome talents from these two categories to work in Hong Kong. That's all for my presentation.
Thank you. Before you ask a question, please identify your organization, and you can ask no more than 3 questions. Please use the mic. On the right-hand side, the gentleman in green on the last row. The 2 secretaries, good afternoon. First, Mr. Awad Yao, about restructuring of the government. We see that the culture and tourism will be taken out from the CDB, and the industry will be subsumed under the ITB instead. So some say that the powers have been taken away from the CDB. What do you make of this comment? And on copyright ordinance, you said that consultation will start before the end of the year. After the discussions last time, will there be more exemptions to be included? And Mr. Ho, about the MPF, well, there are proposals that they be turned into public annuities, and some have suggested that this is going to be mandatory. What is the government's position on this? Well, if it is going to be mandatory, then the retirees' options for investment will be strictly restricted. Let me take your first question. In terms of restructuring of the government, the CE said that this is an idea floated for the community, to the community for further discussion. Like I said, well, we have come to a critical juncture. There are challenges and also opportunities. When we try to seize hold of the opportunities, we must put in place a structure, a system which can help us in driving our development. So there is no question about some bureaus having their powers taken away from them and some other bureaus get more power. No, that's not the case. What matters most is whether we can have a more effective mechanism which can create the best synergy. So this is something I think the society have consensus on. You raised 2 questions concerning the Bureau. We support the proposals, and in fact, we floated the idea ourselves. If industrial policy can tie in with the INT policy, then that can meet with the needs of the society. In 1999, I was working in the Trade Department. I was responsible for merging the Trade and Industry departments. At that time, a lot of enterprises had to seize hold of the opportunities under CEPA to venture into the mainland market. So when the Trade Department took over the Industry Department, we did a lot of promotion work for SMEs. In the past few years, when we had talked with the many enterprises, many of them are in the process of transformation. And this has to do with technology and innovation. So innovation should straddle across different sectors. And in many enterprises, if they are industrial enterprises, if they can actually be assisted also by the ITB, then that would be good. We think synergy can be created. And in the past few years, in supporting SMEs, we see that they need a lot of barriers to be removed for them. So in the past few years, we have done a lot in removing the barriers for SMEs. We have provided outreach services to them, which can be further expanded to help them. So if enterprises are going to transform themselves, and say if they have production in the mainland, they have a supply chain in the mainland, if they can be involved in reindustrialization, then they can benefit. Another is an obvious example. Culture, sports, and tourism are interrelated. And in the past few years, I've visited many enterprises which are engaged in artworks trading. This is a vibrant industry. We have surpassed London and New York as the artworks trading center, the world's first artworks trading center. Why are so many such enterprises coming to Hong Kong? And that has to do with our policy. And West Kowloon district is a very good example. So culture is in every way related to tourism and tourist sports with cultural characteristics are also very popular. So we think that merging culture, sports, and tourism together under one bureau may be a good direction. So that's why the CE has listed this as an option in the policy address that can be a starting point for a discussion. So what we have in mind is to make sure that we have an effective mechanism in place to take forward our work. Second question about amendment of the copyright ordinance. Well, the sector has asked for it. If Hong Kong is to develop into an international economic and trade center and an INT center, well, protecting copyright is a priority. If we can't protect people against infringement of copyright, that will impede the development in that regard. Last time, because of filibustering, the copyright ordinance was not amended, despite the fact that the Bills Committee had a consensus already. And some people query whether the copyright amendment ordinance will undermine freedom of creation. But actually, the amended versions back then gave sufficient protection to copyright. So those documents could serve as a starting point for our discussion. When we do our discussion, we will not be very rigid in our approach. But anyway, we need a starting point, right? And the starting point is the areas which have received or which have got the greatest consensus among the stakeholders. And as to the end point, then we will leave it up to the society to decide and leave it up to the electrical to decide. So we should embark on a consultation. I have already started to talk to organizations in the sector, and they do welcome our proposal. Sorry, the speaker is not coming through. Our aim is to start the discussion next month. Normally, we'll spend a few months to listen to views before we submit a proposal to the electrical. Since Hong Kong would like to turn itself into an IP rights trading center, there is an urgent need to amend the copyright ordinance to protect copyright. Mr. Hui, thank you for your question. This morning, the Chief Executive has answered a similar question. It will not be mandatory. As a step forward, we will work together with the LWB to take forward the work. The gentleman in blue at the front. From Mingpao, the policy address mentioned something about the MPF, and it will study with the MPFA to facilitate the MPFA accounts to invest into bonds issued by the government. Does it cover only the state bonds or the bonds issued by the local governments? And a lot of them actually don't come with issue rating. But the guidelines said that only bonds with issue rating be included in the list of investment options. So does it mean that the investment guidelines have to be revised or even laws amended. And the sector has also said that if issue rating is to be relaxed to issuer rating, do you think that's a feasible option or proposal? And if that is allowed, how would you protect Hong Kong people against risk in investing into such bonds? Because all along they've been investing into international bonds with issue ratings.
For securities where MPF can invest, one criteria is international rating. Second, these should be listed in approved stock exchange. And thirdly, bonds issued by governments or international organizations. Currently, there are bonds without ratings which MPF can invest into. Concerning the mainland government and policy bank bonds, we are still looking into the specifics. This is just the broad direction. For the next step, we will work with the MPFA and consult the market about what government and policy bank bonds should be included. Next question, the lady on the third row. I'm from Oriental Daily. About invigorating Island South. According to the PA, the surveying of the typhoon shelter will begin next year. So do you have a timetable, and when will it be completed? So invigorating Island South will involve the jumbo floating restaurants. It is of public interest. So when will you have a plan? The Ocean Park is still suffering a loss. So how will you promote Ocean Park, and what plan do you have in mind? And you said you would conduct a study concerning the Deep Bay and Tai Shui Wan pier for the Ocean Park. So which party will conduct the research, and who will fund it? Now we are concerned about the copyright ordinance. Concerning the discussion back in 2014, there were people worrying that maybe secondary creation would also be included under the bill. So how can you make sure that freedom of speech and freedom of creation would not be affected? Under the Basic Law, personal rights, including freedom to create, are protected. Concerning copyright ordinance, in considering a case, the court would also give regard to protection of personal freedom. Back in year 2013 and 14, in our bill, we have also provided exemptions. That is for when certain criteria are met, parody and secondary creation will be exempted. So when we have a concrete bill, we will submit it, and we will consult the public concerning the bill. Of course, we will have to strike a balance between things. On one hand, we have to respect the freedom to create. We respect secondary creation. However, we don't want the rights of the original work be infringed. That's why we have to consult the public, and we will explain the provisions clearly to the public. We don't want things to go extreme, like the previous time. So this is a two-step approach. We will compile our bill, and then we will consult the electoral. When we have the support from the Bills Committee, then we will engage in legislation. There will be sufficient time for public consultation. Concerning the Invigorating Island South or the Ocean Park plan, in the policy address there is a blueprint. Under the Development Bureau, an office has been set up to steer the development of the Invigorating Island South project. At a suitable time, the public will be updated on the progress. The Island South is very unique in terms of its geographical characteristics. We have the Ocean Park. It is an attraction for conservation, education, and tourism. With the funding approved by the LegCo, we have engaged upon a rebirth plan for the Ocean Park. First, it will not just be a theme park. There will be conservation elements and leisure elements. One important direction is that the lower park area will be opened up for leisure and entertainment purposes. The Ocean Park has begun inviting interested parties. Earlier next year, tender will be invited to take forward the redevelopment of the lower park area. It will bring about profit and also alleviates the financial pressure faced by the Ocean Park because of the anti-epidemic measures. For the activities in the Ocean Park, there will be enhancements as well. There will be enhanced transport, and we have amended the laws to allow nearshore activities. These include inviting the Jumbo Floating Restaurant as a partner. Well, it really depends on the willingness of the owner of the Jumbo Floating Restaurants to partner up with Ocean Park. With this rebirth plan, we can attract more visitors to Ocean Park beyond the park area, and also it will facilitate transport to Ocean Park and the water world when the new pier is built. So the plan is being taken forward as agreed by the Legislative Council members. Next question, the lady.
The first two is for Mr. Yao. So for the copyright ordinance amendment proposal, by saying using the suggestions of Bills Committee as a starting point, do you mean that the government is not planning to offer any new exemption this time? And are you worried that it cannot ease the concerns of internet users? And the second question is, because the chief executive has said that she wants RTHK to play an active role in promoting the Constitution and the Basic Law. So what exactly does RTHK needs to do on that front? And the third question is for Mr. Hui. Where does Hong Kong find the money to fund two mega projects, the Land Hub tomorrow and also the Northern Metropolis at the same time? And are there any other means to raise money other than issuing bonds? Thank you.
Yeah, can I take the first two? On copyright, I think we all see the imminent need for this piece of legislation to be updated, to catch up with the very outdated legislation that we are having now. This catching up involves bringing the legislation on par with technological changes. We are not talking about paper copy copyright. We're talking about, for instance, various electronic means. So catching up on the technology side is important. And second is to plug the loopholes of a lot of enforcement against malpractices, which are imminently required and desperately sort of requested by the trade. But of course, I think the copyright bill, when it was failed last time because of the filibustering at LegCo, had also aroused some sort of a concern and discussion about freedom and right and whatever. So I think the easiest starting point would be to bring the bill back to LegCo, and prior to that, have a public consultation so that we can all tease out all these sort of discussion once again. Of course, the balance would be respecting freedom on one hand and protecting copyright on the other. So that's what we will be doing. The consultation will be a starting point. And I think the purpose of it is to gather any views and also allow a round of discussion, particularly on funny issue that people are still concerned. Hopefully we can ease all those concerns before we bring it back to LegCo. But I think the request from the trade has been obvious, and I think average man on the street would realize that, well, we have been lacking behind in this copyright protection for more than a decade. So I think that calls for immediate action. So that's why we will be, we are in fact working on a consultation document to bring it to the public and so that we can have this conversation started earlier. As regards RTHK, I think as the CE mentioned in the policy address, he mentioned about RTHK in the context of strengthening education on the Constitution and the basic law, where RTHK as a public broadcaster and also as a member of the government, as a department, have a sort of duty and also responsibility to help in promoting this. So I think it is also in the charter of RTHK that, well, promoting national education, promoting sort of one country, two system is part and parcel of his job. So with all the changes and improvement we have brought to RTHK in its overall sort of management, I think this is also one very important element that RTHK could be helping us to achieve this. And it is also fall entirely within its charters and missions.
I'll answer the second question regarding how we can support financially the two child projects. I think, as you rightly pointed out, there are multiple ways that we can better deploy our public money or private money to achieve those projects. Because after all, what these projects seek to achieve is a form of investment for Hong Kong. And what they ultimately result in is also an asset to this community. So after all, in terms of the participation of the private sector, it could take the form of bonds, as you highlighted. It could take a form of equity, or so on and so forth. So there are actually multiple ways that we can do that. And also historically, we have done that as well. So I'm not very worried about that.
下一條，右手邊第四項。
The gentleman in white shirt on the right on the fourth row, the RTHK Zhang. Copyright Ordinance. You said that you will start consulting next month. What is your timetable? When do you expect that the amendment bill will be passed and executed? There has been strong opposition in the past, despite there are exemptions, and well, they brand it as the Internet Article 23. So how do you address those concerns? And then the English question previously was that the RTHK under its charter should further promote a sense of national identity and promote the basic law. So how would they go about doing it? Would they be disseminating such messages through their guidelines or existing programs and so on? And for the new editorial guidelines of the RTHK, is a new penalty mechanism being included, and for the Wealth Management Connect that was launched in the 10th of last month. And you said around, well, it seems that it is now facing difficulties. And the mainland authority said that we have to be in person there to actually start the program. What is the development on that front? On the copyright ordinance, you are right in pointing out that there are bound to be a lot of discussions for any new bill. Some of the concerns may be reasonable. Some concerns may be raised out of misunderstanding, or maybe some discussions or some controversies are unnecessary because of the issues being politicized. So I think we should present a bill first. The starting point should be for us to present a bill for the community's discussion. And then we can explain certain issues which have been concerned, and then stakeholders can input their views. The sector may have their own views. Those who are in the creation business can voice their views and so on. The timetable is very clear. As a first step, we will embark on public consultation. Normally, it will last 3 months. And then, before the bill is discussed at the Bills Committee, it can be discussed at the relevant policy panel. And then we can present a specific bill to the LegCo. And for the legislative timetable, we'll have to discuss with the LegCo. We will only present a bill or introduce a bill to the Council after we have consulted the public duly and come up with a draft of the bill. That's all understandable. Now, as regards RTHK, when I answered the English question, I also said the same. The Chief Executive mentioned in paragraph 11 about the RTHK playing an active role in promoting the Constitution and the Basic Law because it is a public service broadcasting. And in the Charter of RTHK, in paragraph 4, it is stated clearly that its mission includes promoting one country, two systems, and enhance Hong Kong people's sense of national identity. So how will RTHK do it? Well, then it's up to them. Recently, I've seen them doing a lot of such work on that front. For example, on the 14th five-year plan, they have done some promotion work. And I have also seen them collaborating recently with the mainland in productions of programs. On your third question, the RTHK has prepared a paper on their editorial policy recently. It has included elements from the Charter of RTHK and also sections from their old menus. Early this year, in reviewing the operation of RTHK, we have said that they should strengthen their editorial work and editorial policy. So that paper they produced was produced in response to our review. To my understanding, the RTHK has drawn reference from the practices of overseas public service broadcasters as well as local media organizations which have such editorial policies. In the Charter of RTHK, it is stipulated clearly that they should do something about promoting one country, two systems, so that every staff member in RTHK can know what to do as far as editorial policy is concerned. About Wealth Management Connect. Well, we had a launch ceremony earlier, and then after that, the banks could apply to take part in the program. Well, actually, I was approached by some bankers, and you see that, well, some messages are already circulating in the market. Secondly, you said that for the northbound trading, we have to be in person to witness the account opening. And Well, there are 2 bank accounts to be opened under Wealth Management Connect. First is your local bank account for remittance, and then the other one is the bank account on the other side. Well, the program has not been fully commissioned yet, and we are actively discussing with our mainland counterparts in hoping to get this done as soon as possible.
So what about the rough timetable? It is almost a month. You can see a lot of information circulating in the market. There are banks doing promotions already. So, in fact, banks are already recruiting clients already. Let's take another English question. The lady in the third row.
Good afternoon. Some English questions from the South China Morning Post. My first 2 questions will be addressed to Mr. Yao, and my third question will be addressed to Mr. Hui. So my first question is regarding the numbers quoted in the Invest Hong Kong statistics. So it took 4 years for the number of business operations with foreign parent companies to grow 10%. While it's understandable that there are hiccups with the trade war and social unrest and the COVID pandemic in recent years, how will Hong Kong exceed this pace of growth given that we have chosen to remain closed to the rest of the world amid this zero COVID strategy? And there are a lot of grand plans, but ultimately entry to the city is still closed. And my second question regarding the IP regulations to be updated in Hong Kong. Mainland China also wants to be a powerful intellectual property nation by 2035 amid its tech race with the U.S. So will they also have a say in how this upgrade to Hong Kong's intellectual property laws are upgraded? And my third question is about the HKMA, SFC, and Hong Kong Stock Exchange are in a feasibility study about the promotion of trading offshore yuan-denominated securities in Hong Kong. So how long will this initial study last? And what are the expectations of mainland regulators for expanding this trading hub in Hong Kong for the offshore products? What are their expectations? And I'd also like to ask about the government restructuring of the bureaus. So the all-new Cultural, Sports, and Tourism bureaus, the Commerce and Economic Bureau has a lot of stake in that, given that it does handle tourism and films as well. So where will all of these sectors be handled, and are you afraid of, it's kind of like dissecting this bureau?
So I'll respond to the first question regarding renminbi. So if you take a more broad view, basically what we try to build here is a renminbi ecosystem. And in terms of what we have done, as I highlighted in my earlier presentation, in fact, we already have infrastructure in place since 2010. So the whole point right now is really push for more supply of renminbi products in a way that it will engender more demand for renminbi and also to encourage more people to invest in such products. So right now, as you highlighted, the HAEX, SFC, and MA are forming a group in order to identify and also work on the proposals with a view to increasing the supply of such products in the market. And one thing which is very obvious is the fact that right now for Stock Connect Southbound, while we are talking about the inclusion of Hong Kong dollar denominated stocks for investment from the mainland investors, in fact, our mainland investors, in their hands, they are with renminbi. So right now, the issue that they have, or the arrangement as applied to them right now, is that they need to convert the renminbi they now have to Hong Kong dollar when they buy the Hong Kong dollar through the southbound Stock Connect. And so if we are to pursue this route of encouraging or allowing our mainland investors to use renminbi to buy direct the Hong Kong dollar or Hong Kong stocks, which are now denominated not in Hong Kong dollar but renminbi, it will save them a lot of, first of all, transaction cost, and also give them the certainty in terms of the amount they need to put in when they buy those Hong Kong stocks. So that's exactly the one thing that we are working on. But that's not enough. Of course, what we're working on is also a host of other measures that we hope that through this collaboration across different bodies, we can achieve a roadmap or a broader view in terms of what are the other things that we should do in order to build out this ecosystem. Because after all, an ecosystem to be built out is not built overnight. It needs efforts, in different ways through multiple channels, and also it needs to dovetail not just on the supply side, but also on the demand side. That's exactly what we are pursuing.
Yeah, your three questions. First about foreign firms operating in Hong Kong. I think these sets of figures should be read in this light. In the past few years, particularly the past 2 to 3 years, in fact, Hong Kong has been suffering from a lot of challenges, from trade war, social unrest, to COVID-19, hitting both the global, regional, and the local economies. And particularly with all these sort of difficulties in doing business, both locally and also in the region, one would have thought that, well, foreign firms might be subject to a huge pressure. Particularly recently, you have heard a lot of chambers crying for help in sort of an early resumption of traveling. Yeah. But I think the figures speak for itself that, well, throughout this 5 years, foreign firms in Hong Kong are not shrinking at all, but steadily on the growth side. In 5 years, we have picked up 10%, and compared with last year, we have a marginal increase. So by and large, they are stable, they are stay put. And this coincides with the feedback we got from international chambers that we are meeting with on a regular basis. Despite all the difficulties, I think they are in general content with staying in Hong Kong. And of course, there's no ground for complacency. Of course, they very much hope that, well, things could be back to normal, traveling could be resumed so they can operate not just in Hong Kong but also in the region. But by and large, I think the comfort we drawn from these figures, we are not seeing any exodus of firms, as some media might have sort of a worry about. We are seeing, in fact, the number of international firms, including those from mainland, are generally on the rise and making, in fact, a record. 9,049 is a record in the past 5 years. And so as the number of startups, which has a more phenomenal growth. But of course, the two sets of figures are against different background. Startup is a more recent trend that, well, Hong Kong is definitely a very attractive place for startup. Foreign firms have been in Hong Kong for centuries, decades. But despite all the challenges, I think the figures demonstrate a confidence that, well, Hong Kong is still a very attractive place for them to operate for the region. And this is also supported by other figures. For instance, FDI to Hong Kong, last year we ranked the third largest in the world. And also we are seeing the employment in relation to this sector also growing. So that's my interpretation. Of course, that also calls for action that will redouble our efforts to make sure that, well, firms operating in Hong Kong would get the best out of their business. And that's why we are also working hard in, for instance, in resuming traveling with the mainland and the wider world as soon as we could, right? The second question about protection of copyright against the mainland's background. I've answered to an earlier question that, well, to start with, Hong Kong has the natural advantage as an IP trading center, because we are a major international trading hub, not to mention the comprehensive legal framework that we have put in place, the rule of law, whatever, that supports this role. But it is also strengthened by the fact that mainland companies, as a group, are now the biggest applicant for all the patent design copyright as the nation emerge into more innovation, technological development. And naturally, they would like their designs or innovation being protected under the law. And Hong Kong can in fact serve this place. And I think that's the reason why we propose, and then also the nation has put this into the 14th five-year plan, designating Hong Kong as one of the, the IP trading center. But in so doing, we must catch up with the systemic safeguards, including proposal that I mentioned earlier, updating the copyright law, improving on our copyright registration system, and also strengthening the training and also experience sharing within the trade. So these are to gear up for both the national development and also taking full advantage of Hong Kong's position. The last point about reorganization, I think, well, we are talking about not one bureau's gain or the other's lost. We are talking about how to sort of refine the overall policy making and also management administration structure that could gear up to all the challenges and also opportunity given to us. Clearly, I think in my bureau, there are synergy for some policy portfolio to be better collaborated with areas in other bureau. Take, for instance, arts and culture. My bureau look after the so-called money side whereas the promotion of arts and culture falls into another bureau. But naturally, that would create a very good synergy. Not to mention that, well, nowadays arts and culture, besides trade, could also draw attraction to tourism trade. So we are seeing in this light how we could sort of come up with a better sort of arrangement among policy bureaus to cater for the new challenges. So we take this a more liberal view instead of looking from a single bureau's perspective. Yeah, thank you.
我哋答多兩位記者。
Let's answer two more questions from journalists. The gentleman in grey. I'm from Stand News. Mr. Yao, for the amendment of the copyright ordinance, there are two additional elements, for example, including the 14th National Five-Year Plan and also turning Hong Kong into an IP trading center. So has the mainland government required Hong Kong to amend the copyright ordinance in light of the 14th National Five-Year Plan? After the two previous amendment exercises, how would you go about doing the amendment? Are there any additional requirements in the latest consultation exercise? You mentioned about strengths of Hong Kong. Even without amending the ordinance, we have such advantages. So why the need for amending the ordinance? Mr. Hui, the mainland market is quite volatile recently. The mainland government has asked for more people to share in the wealth of the country. So will the mainland policies affect mainland investment and foreign investment coming into Hong Kong? You mentioned about facilitating MPF investments into mainland bonds. Would you be worried that such investment will be affected by changes in the mainland market? First, about amending the copyright ordinance. It is an initiative on the part of the Hong Kong government. In the discussion on the 14th National Five-Year Plan, the CEDB has been hoping that Hong Kong can play an active role in the areas of copyright or intellectual properties. Earlier on, when we worked on the Belt and Road Initiative, we stressed that professional services are something that Hong Kong is good at and can meet the country's needs. When I assumed office in 2017, we have discussed with sectors related to copyright. They told me back then that the copyright ordinance was so outdated, but it failed to be amended after two amendment exercises. And they were hoping that the new term of government could change things. And in 2017-18, when we discussed with the sector, they showed some frustration. They said that it was impossible given the political environment back then. And then I asked them whether they wanted me to try again. They said no need. So we were in a dilemma. And enterprises in Hong Kong find that there is little protection against copyright infringement. When technologies advance, the new technologies are not covered under the copyright ordinance. So in 2006, when we first floated the idea, and in 2011 and 2014, the Bills Committee agreed to our proposals back and then. But ultimately, we failed to do it. Protection of copyright is related to the development of our trade and economy, and we must catch up. And that's why we propose to revive the amendment exercise. And I think that society needs to appreciate all these. The Bills Committees agreed to our proposals, which were followed by a second resumption of second reading debate. But then the amendment ordinance was not passed ultimately. Is it the right time for us to revive the issue again, given the current electoral environment? But we could not just introduce the old bill. We have to consult the community and also the sector. Several years have passed after 2014. Do we need to update some of the provisions? Should we tighten some provisions? And so on. And could we also address concerns raised by people back then? Could we have a rational and objective discussion on all these issues? So we think that we should do a consultation exercise, have the electrical discussed it, and then have the bill passed. That's the best arrangement. Answering your question about supervision measures for individual sectors. Well, you referred to the wealth gap and also supervision on technology companies. Well, these are issues not unique on the mainland, but there are issues being faced by governments worldwide. Let me supplement what Edward has said. Do you think there will be less capital in Hong Kong? That's not the case. For the AUM, in the past year, it has increased by 20%. If you don't look at that figure, but the licensed corporation number, well, there has been a rise of 4% to 1,800 or so. So that the business has been thriving on that front. And you referred to our study on MPF investments. We hope to provide more options for the MPF account holders so that they can make investments based on their own preferences. To myself, I have every confidence in the development of the nation. Let's answer one last question. Cable TV. Mr. Edward Yao. First, about the amendment of the copyright ordinance. You will start consultation next month. With the blueprint similar to the bill in 2014, while 6 exemption areas were included, will these be capped, or will there be new provisions to further tighten the provisions to set out clearly that any acts endangering national security should not be allowed? And then also restructuring of the policy bureaus. You said that you agree that some of your work portfolio should be taken away from you. You've been in the post for 4 years. Do you find that your workload is too heavy? Hence, you think that it's all right to offload your work. And then after the Lantau Tomorrow Vision, we have another Northern Metropolis development plan. And we talk about a cost of $1 trillion for Lantau Tomorrow Vision. We don't have any figure for Northern Metropolis. Do you think Hong Kong can cope in terms of funding? And the chief executive that this is going to be a profit-making project. So do you have confidence that you will recover the costs?
On your first question, well, many reporters have asked this question repeatedly. So it fortifies my belief that we have to reactivate the bill. Otherwise, we will just be boggled down before we have a discussion. We have to consult the sector. That is the most important thing. Compared with other advanced economies comparable to Hong Kong, they have updated their copyright ordinance. Back in year 2016, we already considered that our legislation was outdated in terms of the advancements in technology. We have failed twice, so should we give up? When this is helpful for our economy, when it is beneficial for our economy as well as the national development and supported by the sector, why shouldn't we submit the proposal again? We have already reached a consensus back in the Bills Committee in year 2014, so we can use that as a starting point. You're worrying that there were lots of different views, so should we add more exemptions or delete some exemptions? Well, there are always going to be different arguments. The most convenient starting point would be to base our bill on the consensus that we have reached back in year 2016. Of course, we need to consult the public, but we can use that consensus as the blueprint for the new bill. That is the most practical way to go. On national security issues, well, since we have the national security law, when there are things that would endanger national security, they can be dealt with by the NSL. For any further legislative amendments, we have to give play to we have to pay attention to protecting national security, for example, films and so on. So we have to keep that in mind. The point is the copyright ordinance is outdated. We have failed twice because of different factors. However, we cannot give up on updating the copyright ordinance. Your second question is based on a wrong premises. If I would not reject the proposal of restructuring the government simply because of my personal views. That is not responsible. In the third term of the government, when I was the Secretary for Environment, well, the Bureau came to place because of a restructuring exercise. In the previous term of the government, halfway through the second term of the government, information and technology the portfolio was taken away from my bureau. So when dealing with economic and commerce issues or other issues, there may be a need to restructure the government's portfolio in terms of better meeting the need of the public and society. So there should be a discussion about it. The discussion should not be about someone's own work. I believe that is the attitude of the entire civil service. During our initial study, we did identify portfolios which could be merged. Previously, there were cases when we had to carve out portfolios to better meet the need of the situation. So this is the responsible way to go to better meet the need of society. I will take the last question on the financial viability. As I said, this is not just expenditure. This is a profitable business. So like the chief executive mentioned, we have issued bond ourselves. We have issued the green bond with 7 times over subscription. It shows the recognition of the market for our effort. And thirdly, bond issuance is not the only way to support these projects. When I answered another legislative council member, I said this is a cocktail solution. There will be different channels to fund the projects through bond issuance and other channels. So I'm definitely confident about that. This is the end of the press conference. Thank you.